The following is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
Thank you so much for downloading this episode of So What Do You Really Do? The podcast where I, your host, Deadair Dennis Maller, talks to artists and entertainers about their day jobs and the artist and the entertainer who is on with an interesting jobs. Today's podcast is comedian, podcaster, and radio personality Justin Schlegel. Justin is a Baltimore comic. Well, I guess former comic now, despite my efforts in the interview to try and convince him to go back to doing stand-up. He's happy with what he's doing now. Is also the morning show host on JSS, Justin, Scott, and Spiegel, the morning rock radio show on 98 Rock, heritage radio station 98 Rock. I grew up listening to it. Kirk, Mark, and Lopez. You know, I also remember listening to, obviously, Mick and Amelia, and then now they've been replaced. They've went away, and then Justin, Scott, and Spiegel show's taken over. Justin and I actually run in the same circle of people because I started my comedy career in Baltimore. I used to work at the Baltimore Comedy Factory. We used to hang out, do shows, and be around each other in different genres of it. And again, also working in radio. I worked for the competitor in town. They're the heritage station. I knew everybody at 98 Rock because I would go to their events. We would be at each other. We would be at the same concerts, working out and stuff, you know, doing our remote broadcasts and our appearances and stuff. So I have a long tangented history with 98 Rock and the personnel there. And it was really good to have Justin on here because he is somebody who's an amazing talent. He's the person that I look up to, you know, but he's also same age as me, come from a similar background, but he's also at a place where in his life where he's making different decisions in his life that I'm not ready to make or that I'm not willing to make yet. You know, he's having a tough time with stand-up comedy in his world, whereas I am having a tough time with stand-up comedy, just not willing to walk away from it yet. Justin's perfectly happy with not being a stand-up comedian anymore, with his work on air at 98 Rock, with his new podcast as part of the DLP agenda with former guest of the podcast, Rob Mayer, and also other comedian friend of mine, Joe Robinson. They're three together doing a whole new show. He's doing other podcasts and other episodes and stuff on that DLP Agenda Patreon, which, by the way, you can find on Patreon, Patreon. Just look up DLP Agenda, Die Laughing Productions. Die Laughing Productions is a murder mystery company in Baltimore. And it's, again, so many crossover circles here. Like, I was saying this to Joe when they started this whole murder mystery thing. He went and saw the Murder Mystery Company show. It was like, oh, this is lame and terrible. We're going to make a better one. I worked for the Murder Mystery Company here in Boston, and I had the same thoughts of, this is terrible. These jokes are awful. This makes a ton of money. I, however, did not go out and make my own murder mysteries. I just grit my teeth and bared through the terrible writing and jokes. They created something more. Right now, they're doing, Rob just created, in conjunction with Justin and Spiegel, who's the newsman on the 98 Rock show, the Seinfeld Trivia, where it was a live event of people competing against Josh Spiegel in Seinfeld Trivia. I also have created my own comedy trivia show that I'm trying to get back up off the ground again. And we did one show a couple years ago, trying to get it back up and doing it again, because it was fun. Different genre, a different style of comedy trivia. It's more a stand-up comedy show with pub trivia elements. So we run in very similar circles. So it was nice having him on here, getting the full history, because since I moved to Boston, we don't see each other, you know, and 10, 12 years, 15 years ago when we were palling around doing things, there was no conversation of, oh, where did you start? How did you start? What happened here? What happened there? So it is a lot different, being able to have an interview with a friend and be like, oh, you did start at CBS. They didn't know that. You know, we have Justin and I had a lot of similarities, which, by the way, also in no way relation to anything I said, but we're going to talk about the voice. If this is your first time listening, welcome to the podcast. This is what I sound like now. This is not what I used to sound like. I work for a tour company in Boston, and I give 5 80-minute tours a day with a microphone and headset, and it's just taking a toll on my voice, and it's sounding more and more back like when I used to smoke cigarettes, and I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. I haven't had a cigarette April 10th was 2016 to 2023. What's that? 6 years? 6 years, May, June, July, 3, today. 6 years, 3 months without a cigarette. Wow. Crazy. 6 years and 3 months since I also had my second heart attack and my first stroke. I know. You can listen to older episodes if you would like to find out what all those medical anomalies are about. But I'm fine. And luckily, so is my friend Justin. You'll hear him say something at the end of the podcast because we did record this on the 4th of July, because that is the only time when two adult males who work radio morning show hours, or at least wake up morning show hours, can actually record something without having the family. 9 a.m. on a holiday, we recorded a podcast because that was the only time we were available. And it's a great conversation. It's lovely to hear how Justin's doing, how he's happening, where he started, and where he's at now. So if you do not know who Justin Schlegel is, look him up. He's an amazing comedic talent. He's a wonderful morning show host, and he's a good friend to have around. So please enjoy my conversation with radio personality and comedian and podcaster, Justin Schlegel. Hi, welcome, Justin Schlegel. What's up, buddy?
Hey, what's going on, Dennis?
Man, how was Beach Bash, by the way? I got to listen to some of it in the morning online, but I didn't get to hear all of it. So how was it?
It was okay. It was a little more low-key. We moved to a new hotel. The old one is being demolished and refurbished, and the new one's actually the old Player Hotel. So while nicer, it's also a little bit more expensive, which in the middle of a burgeoning recession might price a couple people out. But those that went had a great time.
That's good. Like, that is a staple of 98 Rock, is the Beach Bash, which is, I don't know about any other radio stations. Like, they all have their, like, chili cook-offs and concert series and jingle balls. And for 98 Rock, it's like, let's get the Ravens to get, like, even before they had the Ravens, but now it's like Ravens players, cheerleaders, let's go to the beach and spend a week at the beach.
It's interesting. The thing actually evolved from what it used to be. The Ravens sort of officially acknowledged Beach Bash as a Ravens property. Like, I'm going to make up a number here, but I'm roundabouts, like 10 years ago. The Ravens Roosts have always done it. They're the fan bases that have, like, Ravens Roost, Local 284. It's like a union hall. Ravens Roost 986 out of Berlin, Germany, whatever. And they did it unofficially forever. And finally, the Ravens like, this thing is really turning into a party. Let's go and join you guys. Because before that, it was a thing called Spring Fling, which, as much as I love Beach Bash, and I do, I look forward to it. Spring Fling was where they would shoot their annual cheerleader calendar in the islands. And they would send us to, like, the Bahamas to watch just a battleship of the world's hottest women parade around in white sands as foamy ocean lapped against their perfectly shaped calves. And then it's Ocean City now, which I love, because shout out to the dough roller, and who doesn't like playing around with Old Pro? But it's different. It's different. No better, no worse, but it's different. And it's a little easier too, because, you know, in the islands, you're kind of stuck there, and you get some weirdo that wants to take you off site and, hey, let's go take a look at a local plantain farm. And I don't want to do that. In Ocean City, I can just go hang out on the boardwalk and get housed on margs.
And it drives quicker and easier, much easier.
Much. If there's an emergency, I can just leave. Or if I forgot something, I could just turn back around. If I leave something in Punta Cana, it stays there forever. Yeah.
Yeah, I realized it used to be like a Cancun, Mexico thing. And then I realized that they started doing it at Ocean City. And I never really thought about the difference. I was just like, whatever. It's closer and probably cheaper for the station.
It's cheaper for the Ravens, the station, also the women, the cheerleaders, and the playmakers. They're 10s in Jamaica. They're also 10s in Moncton, Maryland. Like, it doesn't matter. There's not a guy buying that calendar being like, she was a piece of ass in the Bahamas, but now I'm seeing cattails growing out of the Chesapeake Bay. 8. Like, no, they could have those ladies, those gorgeous women, stand in front of a scrap metal heap, and there's still going to be some guy sweating through his Marlboro Miles purchased tank top. So Doesn't matter where they're at. Why are we flying them and these morning show idiots to Mexico and Playa del Carmen when we could just drive them to Salisbury and get the same results? So it was very smart on both the Ravens and the station's behalf. Selfishly, I miss the islands, but I do have a sweet spot for OC.
Well, it's also like, I started, in radio mostly as a remote broadcast engineer. So remote broadcasts, like going outside of the building, that's how I made my money for all the years in radio, in between stints of being on air and producing morning shows here and there. But that's what I love to do. And when I was when radio decided they didn't want me anymore.
Okay.
I noticed a trend of less and less remotes. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, which obviously, can't go out and be around people and talk into microphones. And now I see that you guys with the 10-year anniversary, with, doing back the beach bashes, the second year since we stopped doing it because of the pandemic, and others, that you guys are, at least with your new manager, it looks like you guys are kind of bringing that back. In the industry as a whole, when you talk to other stations and other friends across the country, does it seem like remote broadcasts are coming back? Because it seemed to be, even though the technology was making it easier, we were getting rid of more and more of them.
Yeah, and 98 Rock is pretty forward-facing, and you know this better than anybody as like an engineer, producer, that the technology has become much, much easier. I mean, what used to be going down there and testing ISDN lines and having to bring, a van's worth of equipment can also almost now, I should say, be done with a JanSport backpack full of stuff. You get a small little Comrex unit. If you have high-speed internet, who doesn't? You should be fine. And we have these processors locally that can make it sound 99% like we're back in the studio. And the reason that 98 Rock and WBAL do as many as they do is their focus on like hyper locality, which will always be radio's backbone. God bless the streaming services and all that, and they're international. But if you want local, you need AM, FM radio or some really well done local podcasts. And if ratings are up and down, I had an old friend that used to work there, Steve Huber, who used to say, no matter what the ratings are, we'll win in the streets. And by that, he means, a manager at a business or an owner of a business that we're trying to get to advertise might look and go, oh, you guys were first and now you're third, or this one station's second place, you guys were fourth, or you're first, whatever. But if you do a remote broadcast from their place or someone else's that they could see, and they see hundreds of people walking up to it or walking to the front door or gathering a crowd, that's people in a building. They have a building that they want to have people in. It's a business. So you can show them, hey, whatever that paper says doesn't matter. The ratings system, as you well know, is beyond flawed. We bring people through a front door. And that's what a remote does. We just got done doing one at the Stables in Westminster. It's a great restaurant north of Baltimore that we haven't been to in forever. And we're able to take photos from that now and be like, hey, look, we put 200 people in a room at 6 a.m. for their business, and they bought food and they bought drinks and they hung around after the show. Would you like us to do the same for you if we show that to a new business? And that's what a remote is. That's what's special about remote broadcasting and live events, is that you could take proof of concept to someone else and be like, hey, do you want to advertise with us? Do you want us to do this in here with you? So there's still a lot of value in them. You're shooting yourself in the foot if you're a radio station that's not.
Oh, yeah. No, and this is what I always loved about Hearst and the 98 Rock BL station is they let the people run the place locally. iHeart, who's the company I worked for 15 years, is doing everything they can to be whitewashed across the country and they're trying to be the TGI Fridays of radio. No matter what city you go in, the station sounds exactly like your station back at your home. They're not doing local. They're not hitting the local stuff. That was driving me nuts for all those years. I was like, this is all we have, is that we are here. I was your direct competitor at channel 104.3. I was the only, for a short period of time, I was the only voice on an alternative rock station in Baltimore. We were pumping in people from across the country. Meanwhile, I'm sitting right there, and they weren't doing it. And then what we do, we bring up Elliot in the morning from DC up to Baltimore. And I've worked with Elliot, and I think Elliot is an amazing talent.
Legend.
He is. Like, if that guy could just conform to the corporate structure, he would be so much bigger than he is. But he's so anti that he just doesn't want to follow along to the process. And
it's interesting you say that, because I've never had a chance to meet the man, and I grew up listening to the various 99.1s and 98 Rocks and DC 101, and he's such a fascinating guy, and he's beyond talented that I almost wonder if the two roads to go. Does he go the way that he has been, like you said, kind of pushing back against that corporate influence and, hey, you should do this and maybe, quote unquote, be larger, like shoot you across the country? But if they do that, do they change his brand? Is the way he's conducting himself actually keeping him with the longevity that he has? I don't know. It's a question. I wonder if the way that, like you say, he pushes back against management, being like, if you do this, you can be over here. If you do this, we'll broadcast you here. But would that change Elliot? Would that?
Well, his big problem really is that he doesn't want to conform to a clock. That's the big problem. You can't syndicate something if he's not on a clock, unless you're Don Imus. Other than that,
if you're syndicated, you do have a pretty rigid clock that, you've got to be out at the 57s and the 27s and, break for local station identification. Yeah, I could see that being a bit of a stick. That's a problem we have. That, and it's a problem we continue to work on, is us sometimes the train gets rolling down the tracks and we're having too good a time, and I'm looking at the clock and it's like, Christ, we should have broken 3 minutes ago, and traffic's getting bumped back, and what should have been a sponsor read in the 8 o'clock hour is now bumped into the 9 o'clock hour, and that's technically a different ad rate. So yeah, adhering to the clock it's something that 15 years into radio, 20, but 15 full time, I still work on. So I'll never fault the man.
Yeah, and there's times where he's also just wants to start controversy. Like, that's really it is on his big problems. But it also works in times where he's like also going to like the caps. Like, we get minute to minute updates on how many people are listening. And every time he starts talking about the Washington Capitals, ratings go right down the toilet. Every time he talks to an author of a book that he likes, they go right down the drain. And he's like, no, I'm not going to change my show for that, which is admirable. And I commend him for that. But if he could just release a little bit of control to corporate and just pull back a little bit, then he could, also be a great, nationwide talent for a guy who's amazingly, he's one of the best interviewers in the country. And dude, I'm not going to, just keep kissing his ass. You're also one. All right, before I start, I'll give you your flowers, then we're going to talk about your history, because I'm in awe every time you start just doing descriptive things like you just did on here when you're talking about the beach babes and the caps and stuff like that. You're such a great, amazing wordsmith in the moments. I remember when after I moved to Boston, I came back, you guys were doing a car, doing a live remote in Fells Point, and you were doing high card challenge or whatever.
Okay.
Right. With listeners, and just listeners were coming up, and the way the wrestling impromptu intros you were giving to people as they were coming up to play a high card draw challenge tournament were amazing, dude.
Thank you.
You were so good at that in the moment where you're just coming up with the perfect, funniest adjectives when describing something. You were one of the best
those things. There's things like that. I remember that challenge, and it's such a basic, low rent thing that you have to color it in. You add a little sizzle to a pretty gross horse flavored steak that you have to be sure to listen. If this bit isn't as grandiose as you had hoped it would been back in conception, oh shit, we're winning a Marconi for this, and then it gets there, and you're like, all right, hypothetical, live on site. What if you could burp out your butt? And the minute you say it, you're like, God, this is bad. We have to add a little allspice to this thing. I'm glad I have that asset. Thank you for that. But we're in the audio, so we have to describe to excess sometimes, and it gets a little annoying to us to where we might have to over-explain what we're seeing, what we're doing, have to reset a lot. Once again, we're talking to Deadair Dennis live from a neon fallout shelter. You have to be able to describe to people what they're not seeing, because only you are. And if you don't do that well, Plus, like getting back to those like interviews, like you say with him, Elliot talking about an author that he likes, or talking about a Capitals game or something like that. It's on him as a broadcaster and as a pro. And may I have a career like his one day when it's all said and done, to where you take something that might not be as exciting to a chunk of the listenership and you make it, which is something where we talked to a guy about 2 months ago who talked about EMP explosions, which had people just running for dehydrated food, solar panels, and looking at which neighbor, like, I'll eat you. And we had to make it entertaining by describing various things from this book of his that we read, and apocalyptic scenarios, and who'd you eat first in your office, things like that. It's a pretty dark and dour subject that it's on us to somehow color in the details of and make it entertaining for a subject that other people might not find.
Yeah. And well, that shows like you can do that because you have a background and talent of being entertaining. Like you had the guy on the other day who did the Botox injections into Scott's
Dr. George.
scrotum.
Yes.
Yeah. No offense to that guy, but he was just annoyingly cliche. Like I'm listening to him talking, he's like, "Oh," you ask him just a basic question. He goes, "Well, if I told you that, I'd have to kill you." He's like, "Ugh."
I think he's just not used to be on a radio. He's nervous.
Yeah,
he's trying to plug himself in.
Yeah, he's not a talent. I listen to, but here's the thing: I hear people that are a talent do the exact same cliches. I worked alongside those people, and it's like we are the ones. We are the magic makers, right? We should be creating the talent. We should be creating the content, not sharing content. Like when we do blog posts and social media stuff, like iHeart for the longest time pushed blogs, right? Everyone's got to write a blog. Everyone's got to write a blog. Here was everybody's blog. 2 sentences of a description and then a link to read what they read. Meanwhile, I'm writing full out things. I'm recreating the entire thing that I read, putting in the voice of my morning show person, put in my voice, and I was trying to actually create content, and I'm working hard to do that. But it gets the same amount of views as the people who write 2 sentences and then click here for more information. And it's sad.
It just becomes so homogenized and so average. I think literally, as corny as this sounds, was a bit of a hill I'll die on, is that, since the creation of radio, and I'll even take it back, paintings, music, the phrase content creation is so just basic, and it's so overcast. It's that's not the word to use. It's casting too broad in it. I'm a content creator. If I shit in a cup, I've created content. I have a mug and it's full of poop, and that poop is content. And there I am. I've created content. It means nothing. The term content creator, my son is upstairs right now, and he is building an obstacle course for me out of couch cushions, soon to expire vegetables, and probably a steak knife. He's creating content. That means absolutely nothing. And these companies, these larger media conglomerates, and some of these streaming services, they love taking that. Some of these people that just sew their butt cheeks with a hidden link to take you to an OnlyFans page, they're content creators. What is content? The guy that cooks behind the grill, that's content. The guy that puts up a Facebook post on the July 4th. Was that gunshots? Was it a firework? Heads up, Tim. It's a goddamn firework. Happens every year. That's content. You are a radio broadcaster. Elliot's a radio broadcaster. I'm creating a radio program. My friend Rob and Joe create a podcast. My friend Tommy Sambazo creates stand-up comedy. It's when we start calling it content creation, it means everything and nothing all at once. It's such a pointless milquetoast phrase. And trust me, we have some corporate overlords ourselves that they're trying to keep up with the times. Hearst is about the greatest company you could work for, but no one's flawless. And every now and then they'll get someone in the corporate structure, fresh out of business school that read the term content creation somewhere in a syllabus and latched onto it. And all of you need to be content creators. I'm like, well, what the shit do you think we've been doing for the past 10 years? You're calling it content creation. We call it a radio broadcast, social media, whatever. We've been doing it. You can call it whatever you want to. But when I hear a company that you're describing make you write a blog post or do a tweet or some sort of scheduled a bit of business, and it's like, we're content creators. Be a radio broadcaster. Be a television artist. Be a musician. But once you call yourself a content creator, you mean nothing to me. I don't know what you do. Okay. Like I said, My son is upstairs right now, scotch taping fingernail clippings to other fingernails to make longer fingernails. And that's content. I'm going to take a picture of it and I'm going to send it to his Nana. She's not going to open it because she doesn't know how her flip phone works. And that will technically count as the same content as some Audacity 19 market morning show that's putting out top tier product 5 to 10 every day. It's all content. And it makes my skin crawl when I start hearing content creation.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like it either, but it's like, I try not to shy away from what's positive, especially the people who are just, I'm a content creator. Oh no, you're a pretty person on Instagram taking pictures of yourselves. Yeah. Like, not the same thing as what I'm doing or what you're doing, But
once you add that phrase, hey, I've been on stage one time. I'm a comedian. I just bought a camera. I'm a photographer. I own a football. Am I a fucking Raven? Probably not. Okay. I mean, I'm not. I've had sex. No one's going to hire me for you porn. No one. It's when someone's like, I'm a content creator. You seem like you're kind of skipping the line. You could create content, but do people want the content? Like, I never have a problem with the term influencer. I have a problem with the influenced. You can try to influence all you want. You're probably not going to make it past this thick Charles County skull of mine. But it's the person that's like, oh, I saw the YouTuber that screams at jump scare video games come up with his own, soothing liniments. I'll go get them now. Like, okay, at the end of that is, it's advertising. We're taking things that have already existed and we're adding new labels to them. I'm an influencer. You're an advertiser. You're calling it a new thing that's already been here. It really is. Like, I have no problem with the term podcaster because it's literally a new modality to get you the audio. It's now digital. It's online. It's not AM FM. It is. So that is a proper evolution of a medium. AM FM exists. Satellite exists. The podcast is the next great evolution of it all. And that deserves to have a new moniker. But when someone's like, I'm an influencer, you're an advertiser. I'm a content creator. I don't know what the fuck you do. So we love to put new phrases on things. We have a mayor around here. God bless you, Brandon Scott. You're fighting the good fight. But he had a post recently where I think he had a city council get together to discuss another violent incident. And he called it the Baltimore Crime Ecosystem Prevention Council. It's a meeting. It's a goddamn meeting. But someone adds a little extra stink to the name, like, ooh, we're doing something. Look at this. Like, I'm a content creator. No, you show a barely covered picture of your butthole on Instagram. And if you click the link tree, let me guess, there's one at the top flashing 18 plus because you're trying to get a couple of bucks your way because you lost your job at the sulfur factory when everything shut down in the pandemic. It's just, you're a porn star. I mean, you're an adult entertainer. I'm a content creator. I can see your cervix. And that's great. That's fine. I don't want you to not do it. I want you to make your money. And I want you to have your income. If it is you just squirting, Dijon mustard all over your back end while, singing Smash Mouth lyrics in Italian, I hope you make money. But let's not belie the fact that what you're doing has always been done. You're trying to add something new to the moniker. That's a little eye-rolling.
All right. Well, you're about my age. I'm 42. You're what, 44, right?
44. Yep.
So we've been both creating content, working in entertainment, being entertainers for over 20 years. So we have a wealth of knowledge of seeing what the progression of this industry has been. Let's go back to the beginning and talk about when you started, because you were just started as a stand-up comedian. I started as a little kid as an actor, always wanted to be a stand-up, loved stand-up. Didn't start doing stand-up until I was 30. 31, something like that. And I regret that I didn't start earlier because look at our friends who are our age, who've been, what they've been doing and what they've been accomplishing. And if we had those years in that business as well. So when did you start doing stand-up comedy and what got you from being a little skateboarding kid in Southern Maryland in Waldorf to being a stand-up comedian?
Well, I'll adjust the timeline for you just a little bit because it is one that sometimes people get mistaken. Is that I left Waldorf in 1999, 2000 to get into radio. I was in radio for 5 years before I ever got into stand-up. And I worked at what is now I don't know what their goddamn company is. It's gone through so many changes. It was Infinity, which became CBS, which became Entercom, which became Audacity, which next week it'll be Pepperidge Farm Radio. We're talking sausage all morning long on WEGG The Egg. And I did that for 5 years, roundabout in Towson. I worked for, originally I actually worked in Hanover, PA, at a place called, oh God, what was it? Geez, actually I worked at WCBM 680. Then I worked at WYCR, WHVR, York's Hottest Music. Then at the roundabout in Towson through like 5 format flips, B102.7, 105.7. They tried to take on 98 Rock for like 6 months and shit the bed. Then it was X1057 Jams. And then it became Free FM when satellite came out, and they labeled all of their FM stations free, like we thought you were going to start charging for it. And then it became The Fan, and The Fan stuck. And after the 5th format flip, I mildly lost it. Because every time I would stay and these 2 other guys would stay, one of them's name was Henry and the other guy's name escapes me. But we were minimum wage board ops, and we would take 3 8-hour shifts, and I would do the overnights. I'd do 8, Henry would do 8, the third guy would do 8, and there's your 24. And we would always do that to welcome the new staff, to welcome the new management, to welcome the new imaging. And every time they would blow everyone out, all these relationships you'd make and all these, efforts you'd make to work your way up. Maybe I could be a producer. Maybe you could put me on as a sidekick. Maybe something. Progress beyond a board op. And once a year, your legs would be taken out from under you and you'd be bumped back down to the bottom of the ladder. But they kept you on because you could run the board and you'd run whatever automated program while they figured out who's our new lineup of guests. And after like I said, the 5th one, I think it was when they finally did sports, when they got rid of like David Lee Roth in the morning. And it was when Stern went to satellite and they got rid of everybody. And like some people got the junkies, God bless those guys. Then David Lee Roth came and went, Penn Jillette, I can't remember. And I went that night, over the 5th flip, I went to a place called Fraser's on the Avenue in Hamden, and a pretty nice dive bar. I say dive bar like it's a bad thing. It's a nice dive bar. And they were doing a karaoke night. And me and my friend Gordon got a little scotch and soda drunk, and I went up to sing, I think was the Divinals, and I made it through maybe half a chorus and just started cussing about my company. Just came unglued. I mean, I had a Michael Douglas, I'm trying to get home to see my daughter, I have a bazooka, falling down moment where I just verbal diarrhea, where a bunch of onlookers are like, I just want to get up there and sing Crash Test Dummies. What the fuck's the matter with this guy? The host of the thing kind of snatched me up and pulled me aside. I was like, don't do that here. This is... respect the sport of kings. This is karaoke. And he's like, you want to do that comedy crap? You do it here on Sundays with Jim Meyer. You don't do it not on Platinum Dan's sing along fart fest. So I ended up coming back on Sunday and doing it again on a open mic night, not doing well, but having fun. And I think I might have had 1 or 2 quips and a little 3-minute rant that were like, oh, there might be some humor there. And I got to see other local comics, actual good, polished comics. I got to see Jim Meyer. I got to see Big Ben Kennedy. I got to see a guy named Frank Hong. The other names escape me. I think I saw a very, young Mike G, Howard G. And I saw people that were in the game. They had acts. They had crafted acts. And I was a no one. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. So I just came to Fraser's once a week. And once a week turned into twice a week when somebody told me that there's another room across town, a place called Jillian's, which is now the Dave & Buster's in Hanover, Maryland. And I met somebody there that said, hey, there's a Wednesday night room. And I learned about the open mic circuit. And then one night turned into 4 nights. And then 1 year turned into a paid gig. And then it just spiraled from there. It was 2004, June 10th, 2004 was the first time I ever went up. And then, it spiraled from that into stand-up.
See, now, I always knew you worked in radio for the longest time. Like, you were working in radio right when I was getting my start in radio. knowing that backtrack, I didn't realize you worked for CBS up there in Towson.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Bill Pasha. That was my general manager, PD, Bill Pasha.
Yeah. And I can empathize with that. You started at one low level job, hoping to get on your way up, move up. I have a website, deadairdentist.com. On that website is a wall of backhanded compliments.
Yeah.
And one of the compliments was from one of the former program directors of DC 101. I gave him a tape when I was an engineer of an air check, of an audition tape. He pulls me aside. He brings me downstairs into the garage where we're smoking to go over the tape. First thing out of his mouth was like, I was really impressed. It shows you know what you're doing. I'm like, yeah, no shit, Rick. Like, why would I not know what be doing if I wanted to be on air position? He goes, well, no. Most people are either an engineer or a talent. Nobody does both. Yeah. I know you as an engineer. I didn't realize you were this good on the air, right? I want to get you on the air. We'll try and work it out. But because my relationship with Elliot was not good, that ultimately at the end of the day is what kept me from getting on an air position. Because Rick even told me after he left, is like, you saw what they did to the other guys who were working part-time, getting them in trouble stuff because they didn't like them. And I know they didn't like you. And then Elliot and I are fine now. We're amicable. But working as his censor, there's going to be animosity. It's like, I didn't want to put you in that position where they targeted you and got you in trouble. And ultimately, I would have to end up firing you because of this, that, or the other. But
you got to think, though, to that guy's credit, though, he's like, oh, my God, I didn't realize you were this good. He probably has to sift through a stack of insanity every day. Like, if you take a look at some of his audition tapes or gave them a listen, I bet it would sound like sitting there and listening sight unseen to an open mic that you and I have been to countless of, where you go, okay, there's the local pro, there's the young hopeful, there's the guy, there's the has-been that never was, there's the next future great, and now here's 500 psychopaths. It is an absolute bastion of lunatics. And I bet that same program director probably got countless CDs, cassettes, whoever, that he's like, all right, let's see who, DJ Danny Dingus from Lunch Meat, North Dakota is, put it in. And it was just 30 minutes of insane conspiracy ramblings about how, like, oh, 9/11, you think New York even exists? That's not a real place. It's CGI. It's South Boston. He's got to listen to craziness. So if he heard you, Dennis, and he goes, Jesus, this is a breath of fresh air in a world of shit. This is, wow. That's probably what exasperated him. Like, wow, I've listened to a lot of crap today, and I'm hearing something that's not. So he was probably like, thank you. I never expected this. I just heard a lady in the background in the middle of her, recording her popcorn be done, which is actually a thing that one of my bosses once played me. Dave Hill, God bless you, wherever you are. He played me a tape of a guy who auditioned for something, and he was back selling a song like, hey, what's going on? It's Fartin' Frankie on WTRD, the turd. We're stinking up your more. Just go ahead and take that out of the microwave. You can just put it on a bowl. Yeah. Just turn it up. Okay. Coming up, we're giving away 2 tickets to watch my mom get a pap smear. It's WDRD, the turd. And he mailed that to how many program directors across the country that in the middle of his audition tape or whatever it was his Orville Redenbacher was ready to go. It's crazy. So I could see where your old PD was like, damn, thank you, Dennis.
See, and that's the thing that I was talking about. That's the thing I love. Ultimately, not a stutter, not a single moment that you stop. Like, we know what you just said is in no way, shape, or form a part that you have talked about 1,000 times, but you just brought an entire original hilarious radio break without even stumbling, dude. You're such a great talent at that. And
thank you, Dennis.
Yes. And dude, I've always thought you were one of the best that I've ever known in stand-up.
Thank you, man. I worked around some of the best. I'll tell you that. I kept good company. Yeah. I looked better by proxy. I was the 5 that hung out with the 10. There was a big-breasted, juicy, butt-cheeked Rory Scovel standing next to this hair-lipped little goblin named Justin Schlegel that if you stumbled upon me in the woods, I'd make you answer a riddle to pass or something. Rory, on the other hand, was just that sweet cinnamon sugar-covered slice that everyone wanted to bang. So I would be near really good comics a lot. That I think by proxy made me look better. Your Aparnas of the world and your Jermaine Fowlers of the world. And obviously Rory's still a good friend at, Yeah, you could judge a man by the company he keeps, and I think I kept some pretty good company.
Yeah, and you rose to them. All right, if what's the phrase? Rising tides raise all ships.
Yeah.
The waters around you were high, and you were swimming. You were right along with them the entire time.
Kept my nose above water more often.
You didn't. You're not trying. You're doing, dude. I know the self-deprecating humor is a part of all of us, and it's hard to take a compliment, but take it, dude. Like, you are amazing talent. Like I told you, and we'll get into the whole LA thing, but I'll just say that 2 stories real quick. One, when you got back from LA, I talked about how disappointed I was that you came back home, but because I feel like when you left LA, it was like giving up on comedy, right? And that's my opinion, and I know that wasn't what you did. What you did is you came home to work at the station that you love, that you grew up on. So it was, in your mind, the better move. But also, my Rory story real quick is the movie with Amy Schumer.
Damn. What was it?
I Feel Pretty.
I Feel Pretty, yes.
I'm in that movie. I forget the name of it. So there's a scene where in the bar where Amy and Rory have the argument. She thinks he doesn't like her and she leaves. I'm literally standing behind Rory the entire time, that entire scene. Yeah. Right? And I'm hanging out with Roy all day on set. We do the thing. That night, him and I both do a show together. He's coming up the stairs. I look down at him at the Comedy Studio. I was like, hey, what's up? He goes, hey, wait, didn't we? Hey, what's up? And we, shook hands. And we're like, yeah, we've been hanging out all day, but I wasn't allowed to talk to you then. And he's like, I know, weird. And he laments this story to me that I'm probably not allowed to tell, but I'm going to tell it, is that the reason he got that role is because the actor who was supposed to have that role, because of Trump, they put in some passport stopping, I think, from Syria or something. And he's apparently has a Syrian passport, this actor. He's English and Syrian, and they wouldn't let him in the country. So they last minute called Roy to come to.
Really? No, I didn't know that.
And he tells me that. I'm like, is that public knowledge? He goes, it's absolutely not. In fact, I don't think I was supposed to tell you that. And I'm pretty sure I wasn't supposed to tell that now, too. So,
well, luckily it came out in 2018. So, which, by the way, wasn't that movie I Feel Pretty? Hold on, I just want to make sure I have this right. I Feel Pretty movie.
It's the one where she bangs her head and then she now thinks she's pretty. But
wasn't there a shooting? Wasn't there an odd, wasn't there somebody got shot in a movie theater or something? It had nothing to do with the movie. I might be making this up. Movie theater shooting. I gotta, maybe I'm thinking of something else. There was an Amy Schumer movie that, again, it had nothing to do with her or anything, that there was a shooting. Oh, why can't I think it? Why is my brain latched onto this goddamn thing right now? Trainwreck.
Yeah, Trainwreck. Was there a shooting during the...
That's what it was. 2015, the movie Trainwreck. Yes, John Hauser opened fire during a showing of the film Trainwreck with Amy Schumer, and John Cena, I believe, was in that as well as Bill Hader. And I remember right around the time that the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie came out, everyone thought there's going to be a bloodbath in this bitch as he inspires all of these incels to take up arms and spray and pray over the girl that wanted nothing to do with him in middle school. And everyone's like, heads up. The last theater shooting was an Amy Schumer rom-com featuring the former WWE champion and the face that runs the place, John Cena. You can't see me because I hit the fucking deck during a shooting. So I remember that Joker film coming out and everybody freaking out about it. And yeah, okay, well, good. I'm glad it's not the Rory film then. I Feel Pretty. I'm glad it's not that one because he doesn't deserve to have a theater shooting associated with his talented name. Did you see Babylon with him in it by any chance?
I have not yet, no.
Wild movie in a wild role. And he plays a character, I think it's called The Count, where he's the world's sweetest, most eccentric pillhead, that he provides all of the stars of Hollywood in the 30s and 40s just quaaludes and stuff. And he has a scene in that movie that I would have given anything to have been an extra in the background as he descends into the bowels, the soft, white, funky underbelly of Los Angeles to see an underground Illuminati-like party where just the most wanton, wretched Epstein Island, I'm going to fuck that armadillo type of activities are taking place. And it's going down the hell levels of hell into Dante's Inferno. But it's Rory the entire time guiding this other character through this nightmare to get to this one character at the end of it, played by, I think, Tobey Maguire, and a bodybuilder who does something horrible to a rat. And just knowing that's like, it's my friend Rory in there, having to see this obviously staged scene, but I mean, it's like something out of the movie Seven. How horrifying it is. You couldn't take a sweeter, kinder, funnier, bubblier, more talented soul than a Rory and then put him into basically a spin-off from the movie Hostel than this scene. It's the movie Babylon, little long, but worth watching just for Rory.
Well, this is my only day off in 3 weeks, so when I'm done with this and I guess I'm watching Babylon. I'm pretty sure that's an HBO one, right? That's an HBO movie. Yeah.
You can watch it on Max. So, yeah. But to get to the other thing about LA.
Yeah, because I want to know, what was the inspiration to get to Unrigged? Because you already started working. Well, let me ask you this. Are we allowed to talk about your mentor in comedy and radio, Mickey?
Bill Riley? No, Bill Riley.
Bill Riley? Okay.
Bill Riley was my student. I worked underneath and with Mickey. Kirk McEwen was actually the first guy to ever get me on 98 Rock. And then Mickey and I became friends, and then that was off to the races there. But the first guy that ever get me on was Kirk. But then Mickey and I started palling around because we did stand-up shows together and all that. And he was killing it in the afternoons, and he was even more so in the mornings when they took on Dynamite in afternoons, and I think took on I can't remember the other show that they took on in mornings, but him and Amelia and Spiegs crushed it. So, but my true radio, you talk about mentor, the guy I sat in the learning tree, Bill Riley. Bill Riley from Sheffield, from BIM, from various pop stations around the area. That was the guy that I literally learned radio from. And he was like the head professor at the Sheffield Institute for the Recording Arts for quite a while. So that was the guy.
Well, I'm more curious about your relationship with Mickey. Are we allowed to talk about that? How is that?
You can get into it.
Because you guys seem like you were the best of buds. You were doing stand-up shows together. Yeah. You both worked at 98 Rock. You have similar trajectories in your careers, right? You have similar styles, in the way that you guys talk. You're both very high energy, whereas some comedians are very low energy. Like, from the outside, for me, it looked like that you were following, his
the trajectory was almost identical.
Yeah. Right.
Except I think he started in radio. I started in stand-up and got into radio, and I was radio, stand-up, radio.
Yeah, but so as becoming like, you guys were literally the two top comedians in Baltimore between 98 Rock and just the sheer talent the two of you guys have. Where did that relationship between you guys start? Like, when you and Mickey started really just working shows together, what was how did that start forming together, and what was your impression of Mickey? Did you like?
Oh no, he was the biggest act in the area. I mean, he's one of the greatest comedians this area has ever put out, and I'd see him. I mean, if you go to a club, he'd probably be headlining it. Sometimes he'd do drop-ins and do a guest set for 10 minutes and crush the room and bounce. And like I said, I did something at the old Baltimore Comedy Factory outlet above the Burke's restaurant, which is now a Rofo, and I did something with Kirk, and they had me up, and I somehow met Mickey, maybe at the station, maybe at another show, and I got to MC for him and then feature for him, and we just worked well together. And then they brought me into their morning show. It's interesting. Stand-up got me back into radio because I became a radio guest. And as him and I started doing shows, myself, him, Joe Robinson, some others, Eric Myers, RIP, that he would just have us up as guests, the way he'd have Pete Eibner up, the way he'd have Mike Stork up, the way he'd have Mark Voice back in the day. He would just have me up, and we just got along. And he'd do some shows with me, or he'd do some shows with Joe, and he'd give us airtime and stuff like that to help promote the gig. So we'd crush it on air, and then later that night, the people that wanted to hear it but unedited could then come out to a club and see it there. And he was always trying to balance two things. Three, if you count family, but him really leaning into doing a great radio show, but really trying to go for it with comedy. Like, you're not going to find somebody more business ambitious than him when he was really, really doing it. He was a lot more ambitious than your average comedian from around here.
Yeah, and him and Amelia started as the afternoon show, and they got moved to mornings. Is that when you took over afternoons? When he moved to mornings?
No, I did nights. That the comedy radio thing kind of came to a head where Joe Robinson left the night show with Theo and Joe called Irresponsible Radio. Theo did it for a while, but he liked doing a talk show, music show format. So my old Dave Hill, program director, he asked me about partnering up with Theo and doing a night show. And I had concerns because I was still really gung-ho comedy. So, and it's a night show. It's kind of hard to go do open mics and do stuff like that at night. And he said he'd work with me, and if I needed nights, whatever. But I was also in the middle of trying to get Montreal. And I got Montreal, and I was able to go and do the Montreal Comedy Festival. It's a pretty big comedy festival. And I did that, and it's kind of like the Combine for young comics, I call it. Like, if you go there, you're going to get noticed. I was on the New Faces 2010 with Colin Yost, who I hear is currently having sex with Black Widow. So talk about two careers that went in separate directions. And he was cool with letting me do that stuff, and it actually really started to take off. So I had to do Montreal, where I got signed by an agency that wanted me to move to Los Angeles, and he gave me the night show with Theo. I did one show with Theo, and then he had something go on personally to where he needed to move back home to take care of some business. So it just became me at night. We called it the Justin Schlegel fiasco because the whole thing was a fiasco. So we called it the Justin Schlegel fiasco, plus a little homage to one of my favorite artists, Wesley Willis, Rocket Pitbull's ass, whoop Dracula's ass. And I then had to go to LA, and I had to tell him, I was like, hey, I know you just gave me this night show, and I think I did it for a couple of months, but like, I have to go to Los Angeles. My management's like saying, hey, you need to go. We got stuff lined up for you. And he's like, let's figure out something. And I said, you tell me. So this goes all the way back to the beginning of our talk, because we had remote equipment that had since become rather compact. It was a Shure style microphone. It was a very small Behringer mixer, and it was a Comrex unit. And a Comrex unit just plugs into high-speed internet. It processes it there right in the unit and sends it back to the station. The station brings it up. And Dave Hill, who I'll forever be indebted to, I got a great PD now. Dave Hill also holds a pretty sweet spot in my heart. He let me do my night show live from Los Angeles in an apartment with remote equipment that they lent me for a year and a half. And because of the time zone difference, instead of being 7 to midnight out there, it was from 3 till 8, or is it 2 to 8? 4 hours difference, 7, so 3. Right. Yeah, 3 to 8. And I get to record the last 2 hours. So it technically would be 3 to 6. I'd put the last 2 hours in the can, and I'd go right out into the open mics, so the showcases or whatever. So I would work during the day, and then at night, I got to go out and do all this stuff. And auditions are usually very early in the morning. So you go to audition for stuff at like 9, 10 o'clock. I'd have all morning to audition, all morning for table reads, go home, do a radio show, at night, go out and perform. I had the easiest path to walk of a lot of people that moved to Los Angeles, because I was also getting a check. I was getting a check mailed to me once a week from 3800 Hooper Avenue in Baltimore. And it was pretty great. It was great. And he let me do that for about a year and a half. And they do need a local DJ. We talked about locality, being hyper, being local. And a guy on the other side of the country is not that. And also, the night show guy, you can attest to this. You know, the morning show, your Mickey and Amelia's, your Elliott's, they're going to do the grand opening of a new arena. They're going to do this A-level celebrities in town, and they get first crack at them. The night show guy does the grand opening of a deli in a Red Lion, PA, out back of a methadone clinic, whose general manager is literally a rooster. And that's the guy that they need to go do that stuff. They don't have the morning show do that. The afternoon show, not really. And middays rarely do like live broadcasts. Maybe a weekend person, but the night show guy is the one that's like, all right, it's time for you to go to, you know, this oil change facility. We're going to let people squirt you in the asshole with 10W30. Whoever gets it right on the knot gets a t-shirt. That's what you need that guy for. So he needed that. And that wasn't a guy that lived out in LA. So, you know, that went away, and I got a regular day job, morning job, working in a court reporting agency. I used to do video conferencing, teleconferencing. So I did that there. And, yeah, that was what was going on in LA. And that was my to circle back around, my relationship with Mick.
Well, you came back here for a month or two before taking over the morning show?
I was actually here for 9 months.
9 months.
I did afternoons. I did afternoons when Stash left. I came back for that, and was doing afternoons, and then they decided to move on from the mornings. Mick wanted to go and take care. I think he was still deep into trying to make comedy really, really happen, and Amelia didn't want to go anywhere, but I think she was kind of done with the shift. Because it is just a goddamned awful time to wake up. Speaks loves news. He wasn't going anywhere. And Reardon was as good on the air as he was behind the scenes. So they were like, hey, be a morning show host.
Well, because they did you know when you came back here that was in the works?
No idea.
No?
None. Because I was going to be afternoons forever.
I just moved here to Boston when all of that was going on. So I wasn't listening, wasn't knowing what was going on. I was getting text messages from friends when like, oh God, they got rid of Mickey. And, then, the stunting, and then you, Scott, and Spiegel took over. How was that conversation? Because as someone who is friends with Mickey, and him being dismissed, and we don't need to go into Mickey's life story or history about it, all of it.
And that is just one misnomer I'll check on. He and the station legitimately amicably parted ways. There was no like, you're fired. I mean, they let him say goodbye. They did a nice video. I think that shift burns people up. I've come close. So Scott, Josh is just such a beautiful mutant that he is impervious to damage. That he will be there for 4 more shows. He'll be there when they chain that building shut and turn it into a goddamn Bed Bath & Beyond, which, terrible reference, they're closing all those down. But it chews people up. It's hard to have a family. It's hard to do. I mean, you know this, working comedy late at night, which is where he was. It can eat you up, which is why I don't do next to any stand-up. I don't consider myself a stand-up anymore because it's hard to do that to the level that Mick wanted to do it while also waking up at 3 a.m., So, yeah, but there was, for the record, an amicable parting between those guys.
Oh, see, that's, you hear everything, and I've been trying to get Mickey on this, and him and I are back and forth, and you see other things going on, and you question what's happening and how people are and stuff like that. But
if it's not amicable, they don't let you wind down to the end and then do a goodbye video that they feature on their website and their front page. It's one of those things. If you know this from working off the roundabout in Towson, half the people during those 5 format flips, I'd tell you, when it went from pop to rock to urban to talk to sports, half the time that they would show up to work, their key cards wouldn't work. And that's how you found out. You go downstairs and you tap the key card and you get this light buzzer. Huh? Oh, shit. And then someone would meet you downstairs with a bag of your crap. And that's the last time you're in that building. That's when it was not amicable.
You're right. When I was working at Channel 104.3 as a jock and running the shows and stuff, they asked me to come back down to DC to fill in for the guy who took my job as the censor of Elliot. So we're pumping Elliot up there. I used to run Elliot's show in Baltimore. They asked me to come down. Somebody fills in for me in Baltimore. I'm filling in for the guy in DC on the dump button. And I'm listening to Elliot at 9:45 or something like that. Go, hey, by the way, if you're listening to us in Baltimore, you're not going to listen to us anymore. So the station's going to change. Something's going to go on. You can still listen to us in Baltimore and DC 101. You can listen online. But as for now, we're not in Baltimore anymore. And I'm sitting there on the dump button going, I'm sorry, what? Yeah. I'm down the hall from the announcement of my job is now getting taken away, and my station is flipping and nobody's talking. I'm emailing the PDs. I get in my car as soon as Elliot show's over. I drive up there. I walk right in his office and go, what the fuck is going on? Why aren't you answering my calls? What's happening? They're like, relax. We're flipping formats. You are keeping your job because we need somebody to still run the station, to do all the on-air stuff. We're going to pass you up to Toby Knapp. He's doing all the mixing of the pre-programmed music. Learn from him about how to do this. You have a job. What that job is we don't know, but you're the only one that we're keeping.
They need somebody fingers on a board. They need hands on a phone. They need fingers on a keyboard. So that's like I said, when they would flip with us, they keep 3 of us to do 8-hour shifts around the clock, 7 days a week. And when personnel finally got settled in, you would get a day off and then 2 days off. And then they cut your hours down to 10. which was great. I went from working 65 hours down to nothing. And there was a time, one of the format flips. I remember the format flip when they went from hip hop to rock for a moment at the CBS Infinity Entercom, whatever, Pepperidge Farm. That I remember that we were playing carts still. We didn't have any automation. We were still using actual carts, 8 tracks. And you would go in the morning and you would get the commercial log with all the red carts, which were spots, and you get the music log, blue carts, which were music. And you wouldn't pull, Jodeci, I want to taste your titties. You would pull cart 78-424, and that would be the cart. And I remember going in there one morning and the log looking weird. It looked like fresh. Sometimes they would just reuse old logs, like, let's play the 10-day ago log. It's been that long. No one will notice. Everyone noticed. And I had a fresh printed out log, and it's like, okay, pull track 68107, the very first song. And I pulled it out and popped it in the machine, and it's the overnight. I'm beyond tired. So it's after midnight, and I hit the button for what I assume is going to be either Genuine or a Belle Biv DeVoe throwback, and I hear "Welcome to the Jungle." And my eyes get wide, and I'm listening for a second, and I have the next card in, which is the sweeper element. You're listening to X1057 Blazing Jams all night, all right, all tight. Here's Jodeci. And then the next track would be Jodeci. I hit the element. The very next one, there was nothing. You had to fire all the elements manually. The only things that played from one to the other were the commercials. They had a trip tone at the end of each one.
Yeah.
But you had to fire off every single epic. Man, you want to talk about not being able to take a shit? If you heard Drew Hill, I can't remember the name of the song, but Drew Hill had a 6-minute and 50-second long song. If you ever heard that song play multiple times on the overnights, it's because I had diarrhea. I had to play that song just to give me enough time to wind sprint up the hall, back one out, and run back before I had to hit the next element. So Welcome to the Jungle's playing. I'm wide-eyed. I'm awake. I hit the next button, and you hear, "You're listening to Baltimore's Rock. What if I said?" Like, oh, what the hell? I hit the next song, Soundgarden. And I'm looking, and I see all the labels are fresh. And I do the same thing. I email my APD at the time, this guy, Tim, and I'm going, all the songs are rock, and I'm hearing 105.7 The X. What's going on? He goes, "Yeah, we're rock now. I'll see you in an hour. I'm coming in." And you didn't want to give the guy that's got to fire all this stuff off a little heads up, because I've already jumped out of a song. The log is already boned because I had a panic attack because no one told me that it's not hip hop anymore. I'm like, well, what about DJ B? What about the Turntablist? What about Mocha? What about Osei the Dark Secret? What about Frank Ski? What about Quicksilver? What about all my friends that I've made there? By the way, the hip hop station, the greatest people I ever worked with at that place. The only people I ever felt like appreciated and valued by. I still talk to DJ Spice. Shane and I are still friends. I still consider DJ B a mentor of mine. Osei the Dark Secret is still a king. Quicksilver runs Baltimore hip hop radio and the club scene. Those guys were the best. And I finally felt like that was the group I felt like I made the most headway with. And they blew them out. And that was the one that really gutted me. That was the one where I was like, Jesus. This is just going to keep happening. That was the most talented group you had in this building. Sorry they made the oldie station staff across the hall a little nervous. Sorry, the folks at 101.9 Light FM, let's get a little lost in love, that got a little freaked out because a guy came in with a whole crate full of records and was live spinning and scratching on the air with 5 of his boys, having a party, bringing food. Awesome. The X1057 7 years, besides my time at 98 Rock, the best year in radio I ever had. And when they blew them out and they did that key card shit, we're like, son of a bitch. And my guy got a text later from Spice being like, key card doesn't work. I'm like, I know.
Yeah, I worked with Spice at 104.3. Could not be a better guy.
Great.
When I worked at Hot 99.5, like, I didn't get along with everyone at Hot 99.5, but the people I got along with got along like gangbusters. Me and DJ Chris Styles worked hip to hip doing a live mix radio show in a nightclub for 7 years.
Incredible.
Him and I are blood brothers. Like, yeah, we're never not going to be, friends forever,
That's good to hear. Those relationships you make and you maintain. Like Spice and I, we get together like once a month. As a matter of fact, we're going to get together at Davis's soon enough, and we shoot the breeze and catch up about old times, and occasionally Priestley I'll bump into. Priestley was the other. Priestley was the one guy that would take a young broadcaster hopeful and guide you instead of stomp you out, instead of looking at you as the next great threat. That would actually help you, because you never know, it's the whole way up, the way down. You never know who you're going to see, type thing. And if you're talented, you'll stick around. If you're not, stamping out whoever's on the bench or whoever's waiting in the wings, you've only got 2 feet. There's hundreds of them. You will get overwhelmed. Just focus on how you do and you'll be fine. It's the others that were like, I got to keep this young guy or young girl down, or whoever was crappy to you. A lot of those you look back and go, where are you at now? You shoving someone's head underwater until their legs stopped moving didn't keep you in the business, did it? So you're now just celebrating your 10-year anniversary of doing the morning show, which, by the way, when I heard you were having the station was giving you a 10-year anniversary, I was like, you've been working for the station longer than 10 years. I have. JSS is 10 years, but I've been working there officially as a full-time employee for like 13.
Yeah. So the 10 years, ups and downs. Different management, pandemic.
Pandemic was the bad one. Luckily, management-wise, we've only had 2 big shifts in management. And again, just 98 Rock, same format, same owners, 40-plus years. They do it right. You got to really, really try to get fired from that place. It's both a good and bad thing. That there's been some people that have walked the halls. Yeah, you're like, God damn, they still work here? But the station is like, We're gonna let you screw this up. We're not gonna blow you out. It's where I know you've worked at stations where like you guys went from first to a strong second, change the format. Like, wait, what? We're still top 5. There were times where we dropped down to 8th, and they're like, all right, what do we do? How do I fix it? What's going on? Let's talk. Not like, oh God, hit the panic button. But we had a general manager by the name of Ed Kiernan. He left. And then we had Kerry Behegan for a long time. He took over another radio station, a digital station outside of the market, like a year or 2 ago. But he was there for 8 years. And now we have Dan Jarris. He's our general manager. He actually runs TV. And now he has the whole building. And I went from Dave Hill as my program director to Rick Strauss. And Rick Strauss was the original 98 Rock program director before Dave Hill. He basically just came and just took his job back because, when people leave Hearst and 98 and BAL, they're like, God damn, grass ain't always greener. Instead of grass is greener, let's water the grass we're on. So the guy that literally built KML, a legendary radio show there, is now back and runs JSS. So it's been luckily very minimal management changing. There's always staff and personnel changes, but for the most part, we've had the same leaders for a long time, which is good. If you just it's like a football team that keeps getting a new coach. It's just you have to keep starting over. You have to keep figuring out the new playbook, a new scheme, a new coaching style. Luckily, I don't have to deal with that. We keep people for a long time. And ups and downs. There's nothing I would say that would shock you about stuff that worked and stuff that didn't. But I think compared to other shows, not just 98 Rock, in general, other radio shows, anywhere, any shift, that sometimes the talent thinks they're bigger than the station. This station won't survive without me. If I take my talents elsewhere, I'm taking my talents to South Beach. That no one's LeBron in this. No one. The Cavaliers will always exist. The Heat will always exist. Teams are bigger than the players, and we get that. I think we're one of the radio shows compared to others that understands they fire us on Monday. 98 Rock is fine. They'll find somebody new. They'll foster them. They'll fill it. They'll train them. They'll be around for a long time. May that not happen, but I think all of us realize it's about the brand and not us, because if the brand is strong, we're strong. So... And they sign you nice agreements too. A lot of places get a 1-year deal. They sign us for much longer deals than that, which is nice. So you feel comfortable. And they don't put sneaky backdoor language in the contracts. There's a lot of like odd, vaguely worded morality clauses. If they don't like a tweet of yours, you're fired. If they don't like an appearance that you did somewhere where you had a dicey exchange with a listener, you're fired. Someone heard that you got on stage and said something during a comedy act, you're fired. They don't do any of that kind of stuff. The contract's like a page long. There's They're clean. They're easily read. You don't need a lawyer to skim through it.
Well, I know, and how much of this is theater, theater of the radio, and how much is this true? And I'm not the salacious guy trying to get gotcha moments, but I know you struggled a little bit with the station with your comedy, being able to talk about and mention your shows, which is common across the board. You have a venture interest in something outside of the air. You want to talk about it. Some people at the people's stations like, oh, you can't do it because that's technically advertising. Some people realize what's good for you is good for us. Goose and gander. We can do this together, and you back and forth, from what I understand, had issues back and forth with the station where you couldn't mention your comedy shows. And I know for a while that hurt you a little bit emotionally when you were doing these shows. You're the #1 rock morning show station in the city. And then you're doing, Jimmy's Chicken Shack, over on the beach of Delmarva to 12 people.
Yeah, it's it's something you have to try and find that balance in, and they are right. They're like, listen, if we have, let's say, Magoobies buys advertising, and Magoobies is a client, and we do work with Magoobies, and they pay, and I'm making up numbers here. I don't know what this stuff costs, but they buy 10 commercials for $10,000. And they get it on there and they get their 10 spots and it has the effectiveness we hope it has. Then I'm doing my own private gig and I'm mentioning it 20 times, 30 times. I'm probably not paying a dime for it. Station isn't getting anything for it. So I'm taking their airspace to promote my stuff, but the station doesn't get a cut, and a client that's paying to have their voice heard maybe might be getting overshadowed to where it's frustrating for me, but they are in the right. And I think maybe former managers back in the day were a little bit more lax with it. That, what, like you said, goose and gander, what's good for this, me, the individual, is good for the station. Yes, but it is a double-edged sword to where there are clients that they have a contract in place and that could very well just go to a sales manager and be like, why am I paying for this when this guy is advertising, quote unquote, his own product, which is dead similar to ours, and he's mentioning it 3 times as much? That's not right. It's not worth it for me. I'm going to pull my money and I'll go somewhere and broadcast on WPOC or advertise on WERQ or Mix, where no one on there is promoting their own comedy shows. And I don't have to share that message and airtime with them. So frustrating, yes, but they are in the right. And I had to learn that. And, it's, yes, I would love to be able to maybe do some future partnership. We actually have partnered up with my own private, podcasting network with Rob and Joe, the DLP Agenda, with the station. We actually now do co-branded events where we had our very first one, Seinfeld Trivia, sold out Magoobies, which was a 98 Rock DLP productions. I have the DLP Agenda podcast that we folded them into it because we buy advertising now. My podcast, the DLP Agenda, buys ad space on 98 Rock. So we have money on the books to keep the relationship proper and above board. So it's just a new way of doing stuff. And it's a proper way of doing stuff. So you can now see a money trail, and I get to promote because there's cash.
Well, that's the interesting thing is, even before you moved with Rob and Joe, and I've been listening to them because I'm friends with them. Rob's been on the podcast, I recorded Joe's first and only comedy album. Like, I'm friends with them just as much as I am friends with you. Like, we all kind of
same circles
of stuff. And I was happy to hear it, but I was thinking for the longest time, why does Justin not have a podcast? He works in radio. He's an amazing talent. Why hasn't he gotten that podcast? Is there a reason what held you off from moving into the podcasting world? And I'm pretty sure you had other ones that are smaller here and there before that, but
it's funny. I actually have a podcast that has survived me being not on it. I have a podcast that's existed for 13 years that is called the Rough House Podcast. It's a pro wrestling podcast. That was myself and Andy Peters. And then myself and Chris Like-A-Lot, former producer, air talent on 98 Rock. And then I left, and now it's Marty Day from Super Art Fight and Chris Like-A-Lot. So this thing I started in Los Angeles in 2010 still draws breath and does a pretty decent job. It's complete. It's like Menudo. Everyone got blown out, but Menudo still exists. Find us 5 fresh Spanish boys. And Chris and Marty are the fresh Spanish boys. As far as my own, I think it's because I know how much bandwidth I have as far as my efforts. And I know that 98 Rock pays for 99.9% of my existence, my family's, my mortgage, my food, my everything. So they deserve to have that much of my efforts. So that's why for the longest time I didn't. And then Rob and Joe approached me about a year ago because they thought they were kind of spinning their wheels a little bit. They hadn't grown. And we all worked together on air so much, and we worked together with our murder mysteries so much, Die Laughing Productions, that they said, would you like to come on? And I did think about it for a bit, and I talked to the station about it. And I'm like, that's fine. Just don't have it affect your work here, and you're not talking about it on the air until we bought an ad buy, and now you'll hear ads for the DLP agenda because we are advertisers. So I needed to wait to find one that made sense, and I don't have your ability to create one and put it online and advertise it and promote. I don't have the energy for it. Father of three, murder mysteries, radio show, JSS gets the vast majority of my efforts as it deserves to. But this one, because there was already infrastructure in place and Rob and Joe built up a nice brand, that I just sort of added to it. So I sort of barnacled onto their asses, and we changed it from Rob and Joe to DLP. So that's why it needed to make sense, and working with two dear friends did.
Yeah, and I don't fault anybody for not being able to go through the efforts of making all this. Like,
it's an undertaking. A good one like yours is an undertaking. I mean, if you are listening to this and can't see it, I'm looking at a professional radio studio that you're broadcasting from. I'm seeing microphones and condensers and mixers, and I'm seeing wind shears, and I'm seeing proper headphones. I'm not seeing two guys on an Uber mic in a living room. I'm not seeing a guy who's like, holy shit, that conversation we had at the bar was hilarious. We should do a podcast. Let's record it on our iPhone. It sounds like you're talking through a goddamn Radio Shack walkie-talkie. A good podcast is treated like a radio show. Good radio broadcasters make great podcasters. Mark Maron, Mike O'Mara, Chad Dukes, people that all went from incredible radio talents that took it to podcasting, and wouldn't you know it, found as much success, if not more, in some cases. Mark Maron had one of the first big comedy podcasts, WTF. He was also on radio. Joe Rogan had radio experience. So you take it and treat it like a professional broadcast, but without the confines where you can drive in a much wider lane, sort of be your own boss, but you also have to promote yourself and you have to be your own advertising machine. You don't have a company behind you. That's where a lot of the work comes in. So yeah, but to do a podcast well, to your degree, you have to do what you do. And I just knew I couldn't do it. Yeah. I just had to have two people that were already doing it, Rob and Joe.
Like the social media thing too of it, just like that advertising alone. You know, because you don't want to just be always advertising your podcast. You want to create, you have to put out other, going back to our beginning conversation, other content in between. Hey, listen to my podcast. And it's daunting. You want to say something good.
It's got to be well done. It's got to be quality and quantity. Because there's a lot of people that can machine gun you with 10 emails, 10 posts a day, 10 tweets, 15 Instagrams, countless stories. Is any of it good?
Right.
Like if you go to a diner menu and you open up that diner menu and it looks like a goddamn phone book. There's 500 items. How many are good? But then you go to a very nice restaurant and they have 6 things, but they're all exquisite. That's the one you remember. I'm not going to remember the runny eggs and the turkey bacon and the coffee that the lady kept fucking up as she ashed her Winston out into it. I'm going to remember going over to a Smith & Walensky and having a steak that I had to put a down payment on. And I might still be paying off. It was so expensive, but it was so good. You have to not, just like you said, you have to not just advertise it often. You have to do it well because the social media space is so crowded. It's so also clogged up. How do you break out?
It's not even also the content. You got to deal with the algorithm. Right now, I literally just put out a TikTok clip of an interview with me and Jim Jeffries, biggest comedian in the goddamn world right now. 47 views on TikTok.
That strikes me as odd.
Yeah. I literally, the network is refreshing my interview with Lewis Black. Yeah. One of them gets 20 views. The next one gets 12,000 views. There's no rhyme or reason. And when you have an obsessive compulsive disorder that is not fixed by medication like I do, you hypervigilantly focus on it. This morning before our interview, one of the reasons why I didn't get things tested before we got in is because I went started into a downward spiral this morning of looking up Boston Duck Tour reviews on TikTok to see if any of the people who have been on my tours for the past 2 months have tweeted anything about me or TikToked anything about me. And that is a very murky ground to start going into when you have an OCD disorder. You know?
Shadow banning and all that. A lot of this stuff is new to me. Just people that are like, I put up a post, no one's seen it. How did my last one get 50,000? This one got 50. I promoted it. I even paid the money to have it bumped up. That is a world I know nothing of. And if the gods of broadcasting continue to shine on me, may I never need to. Maybe one day. Maybe again, that's more a Rob and Joe talent, or Joe's brother Robbie, who's great with that. But that stuff, the algorithm and how it gets shown. I mean, you're on Instagram. That's how we communicate. You'll look at your feed sometime and go, why am I getting inline skate fails? How is this possible? I'm getting Brie Larson showing me different ways to use cauliflower at my barbecue. I didn't look up any of this. How is this what it's giving me? I don't understand, because it would just be nothing but like lucha libre, Vietnamese butts, and guys doing kick flips down 3 sets of steps at Smallwood Village Shopping Center. It's all it'd be if it listened to what I am interested in and would like to see. But no, the algorithm's like, nah, homie, you're going to see kids in wheelchairs getting attacked by bees. I'm like, all right, I guess that's what I get to see today. Maybe my friend Deadair did a great interview with Jim Jeffries. I might be interested. I'm a big fan of Jim Jeffries. I like to see what my pal Dennis is doing, but they're like, nah, man, you're going to see one of the cast members of My 600-Pound Life getting stuck in an elevator, and here's where the door shuts and cuts him in half. Didn't want to see it. Didn't want to see that. Want to see what my friends are doing. But the algorithm, man, what can you do?
And like what works, why some people are given the opportunity to get the views. I don't understand why it happens. I watch videos and I just, not even just the view count. When you look at the likes, people physically hit a like button for these things. And I watch it. I'm like, why did you like this? I don't know.
Yeah.
Is there satisfying? Man. Yeah. And I have to not drive myself crazy with, but that is the world that I have had to be a part of, because I don't, like me and the network are working on those things. And luckily the network promotes things, and I don't have to see what good or bad numbers their promotion is getting. I just focus on the good and bad of my own, and then go into my downward little spirals. But
same, I will today.
So, all right. So is that the plan for you? Like, is now we've moved away from, we've talked about radio. You're still in it.
Yeah.
That was going to be a career for a while. You're now doing podcasting. You're looking to the future of what this is going to be. You help them, Rob and Joe, take their podcasts and figure out how they can make it more financially viable. You've helped create, more content for the Patreon. You've done many different ways of getting people inspired to be part of the Patreon. Like the reason I joined the Patreon is I did an overnight drive from Boston to Maine, and then Maine to New York, and then New York to Boston, Boston to West Massachusetts, and then back to Boston. And I needed something to listen to, so I paid the $5 for the Rob and Joe Patreon. I put it on, started at the beginning, and went overnight, drove through. I went up, did a comedy show in Maine, drove overnight to New York City to do an episode of Happy with Chris Maloney. And then I drove back home, took a quick nap, did a show in Worcester and back. And I listened to the Rob and Joe
That's awesome.
Patreon through all of that to try and keep me awake. And I was like, well, they're my friends. I want to hear what's going on anyway. I want the dirt. Dude, the reason why I applied to jobs at 98 Rock and got to be able to talk to Rick and all those guys and like having a real conversation about an interview was because you and Joe would go on, all right, we can't talk about this on the regular show, but so-and-so is leaving and this job's going to be open. I was like, oh, well, let me start sending some emails and resumes again.
That's on the Patreon. Okay. Patreon.com/The Rob and Joe Show DLP agenda. Hop on there. $5 gets you all kinds of shit. Now it was the guys did that show for 10 years and they did do, both of them have radio experience. So they did a great radio job with it. A wonderful job. Intros, outros, elements. It wasn't just one big long glob of two guys and an iPhone. They treated it with respect, and Joe built a very nice studio. But yeah, they wanted something else, and I said, you got to give them a value proposition for the Patreon. So $5 gets you this, $10 gets you that, $50 was the big one. We did a house party. I'll tell you another one we've teased. You probably already know about this. There's gonna be a live podcast taping that anybody could come to, but $50 members, this is like a golden tier member, you're gonna get in 20 minutes early, and you're gonna hear a voicemail that Joe has held on his phone for about a year from his father's retirement community about something that they saw that Joe needed to drop what he was doing and speed the fuck over to the retirement community to handle it. And I'm going to tell you what, it took a ShamWow. That's all I'll say. So you get to hear that early. It won't be recorded, and hopefully we wet some people's whistles and go, okay. I mean, if we get 10 people in that room and it's sitting around and chewing the fat. But yeah, just to add, to give people value, because we know $5, while it sounds like nothing, $5 could be the difference between eating and not eating to some. So we have to make it valuable, and we have to still give you free content if you decide that, you know what, hey, it's a bridge too far for me right now. Times are tight. That's fine. Thank you. Just tell people. So we do the once a week show on Tuesday, and we give free Patreon episodes every now and then, like, you know, an introductory offer. Here's Laughs Count Anywhere, the wrestling show. Here's Dork Dynasty, the video game show. Here's Story Time with Tommy Simbazo when he tells his terrifying tales. We'll give you a free one every now and then and be like, hey, if you want more of this, you know what to do. So it's great. I'm just going to keep doing. Really, I feel like I'm in the last chapter of my career right now, because I hope I get to work at 98 Rock for another 20 years, and I'll do this DLP thing on the side for fun. But again, 98 Rock gets 99.109s in a row my efforts, because they're the ones that got me to any level of prominence whatsoever, between comedy, podcasting, voice talent, anything. It all leads back to 98. So they deserve everything.
And to circle back to that, you know, with the business of radio, people don't realize this. Morning radio, morning TV, those things. It takes it takes so much effort to create like you're one on air 5 hours a day, which doesn't sound like a lot. Till you go 5 hours a week, that's 25 hours a week. 25 hours of constant paying attention, constantly being on. Right now, I'm doing 5 80 to 90 minute tours of Boston on a script that I've already written.
Yeah.
It's a matter of just bouncing around and doing a little bit of crowd work, you know, and most of the crowd work, we both know crowd work is a lot of the same jokes, just being recycled.
It's new to them. It's new to them.
Exactly. You know, saying to the kids, oh, here, kids, have you ever driven a boat before? Oh, no, it's very easy. Just aim for the water parts. Huge laugh, you know.
Big laugh.
Like,
there you go.
Sounds like it happened in a moment. Every time a parent hands me their phone to take a picture of the kid, I'm like, oh, hold on, you're getting a text message. When you're done with those losers, meet me at the motel. Oh, you know what? I shouldn't finish reading this. Waka, waka, waka.
Yeah, there you go.
You know?
Yeah, again, but you're getting to pop like, oh my God, that Dennis guy, what a great tour. Excellent. But you got to have some fun stock. I have stock lines. My God. Mm-hmm. When I do crowd work for crowds, I have those. But man, radio's a different beast, because it's a lot of the same crowd. You hope you get new people. You lose, you gain. But you could have stock segments that people come to expect, you know, Monday Morning Confessions, Pitch a Bitch Wednesdays, Hypothetical Thursdays, things like that, benchmarks. But as far as like repeating jokes, which I will again, it's kind of hard with radio. You got to come up with 5 hours of original content every day, 5 days a week, and
on the spot, no prep.
Not a lot of prep. We always have a roadmap. You know this, the clock you talked about earlier, sticking to a clock.
You have a clock, but you don't have the ability to workshop jokes. Like, that's why we go to open mics. Yeah. We go to open mics to make these jokes the best. We talk to our friends. We figure out what's going to work, what doesn't. We test them out. No, you're talking, Josh is reading a news story, and you got to, on that moment, be like, oh, here's something funny about this tragic bag of kittens that fell in the river.
Exactly. You have to, it's live fire. You have to, I mean, we'll come up with talk topics at a time outside of news, outside of sports, but inside of sports, inside of news, where we're sort of reacting. That's why Josh Spiegel, 7 Murrows, news and comment. It's news and comment. He lets us comment, and we don't know ahead of time. He sends us some links in the morning for us to kind of quickly peruse, but his delivery is so genius that the story he will read, other people have heard about from other sources, but you won't get it the way Spiegs gives it. So we're not just reacting to the story about the kittens that got thrown in the water. We're reacting to his delivery of it, and it's unique as hell. And it's a fun palette to color with because of him. So, but yeah, it's work. Radio's work.
Yeah, and it is a lot. I mean, you know, you can't even keep track of the things because you can't follow up and see how it did. You can't bring back. It's churn and burn with that, you know, and I did that for years myself, and it is such a grind. And you know what? I always kept saying when I was working at iHeart, if I ever lose this job, I'm going to start my own live streaming. You know, that's why I have this studio. I'm going to start my own live streaming morning show. I'm going to do my own show. And then when I got lost my job. Did not come down here to start a live streaming show because I was like, oh, the content, by myself, having to work through that is too much. And I know the value of it, like I started a second podcast / YouTube show, when I was coming out of the pandemic to make money. It was a get rich quick scheme if it would work on a YouTube show, and it didn't work. I did 5 episodes a week for 6 weeks. Yeah. Dude,
that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work, and it's got to be defeating. I know the quality was good, but if it just doesn't latch on.
At a distance, remote recording, video editing, audio editing, word of the day with comedians. If you're new to this podcast, so what do you really do? I have a second one called Word of the Day. I haven't updated it in months because I haven't had time to sit down for 8 hours and edit a video. But that, is a lot of work. Everything is so much work, and the people don't realize that. Like you guys, what was the show with Chris Hardwick? At Midnight.
Yeah.
Everyone, oh my God, how do these comedians come up with these in the moment? And you've done those comedy shows where it's a theme of something and they expect you just to be funny in the moment. It's like, no, all of that they said are written down jokes. They may be doing it in a game show format, but it is all planned.
Like I'll give you a great example of exactly what you're talking about. The Comedy Central roasts are entirely scripted.
Oh yeah.
And every roastee knows what the person is going to say. I helped write on 2 of them. And I remember having a couple of jokes that I never got a joke onto the air, but I had a couple of jokes get resubmitted. That means they're interested. Can you change this wording? Can you change this reference? You can't make a Roots Chris reference. They're an advertiser. Okay, I'll change it to something else. Longhorn Steakhouse. And they have to submit it to the talent so the talent can read it and go, okay, we can do that. All that stuff. I mean, again, they're genius level jokes, but don't for a second think that a lot of that stuff hasn't been deeply screened. Radio's different. Radio's live fire. Radio is what's the adage? Ask for forgiveness, not permission. We're a forgiveness industry. And sometimes that forgiveness is not given. And you got to really watch what you say, because a lot of those jokes that get on there, the executives will approve them on Comedy Central and wherever else, but then afterwards the public might be like, they believe they said that, and management's like, oh yeah, we can't believe you said that either. Oh man. Meanwhile, there's a script on your goddamn ivory desk. You've been reading that thing for weeks. You're the one that approved the Gilbert Godfrey 9/11 joke that lost him his Aflac endorsement. You read that. You were like, yes, hell yeah, 9/11. Let's never forget. You're the one that approved that. So don't for a second be like, oh, we're here at Comedy Central, expect our talent to be held to a higher standard. Okay, really? Yeah. We're the ones in radio, and sometimes podcasting too, because podcasting can be very live fire. You're submitting nothing ahead of time from a podcast to your overlords and management and networks. They probably hear it for the first time when it is live and go, God damn, Dennis, not sure if you needed to bring up apartheid during that Jim Jeffries interview, but here we are. Let's talk. It's interesting you talking about those 6 weeks, 5 days that it was good and you crafted it, and for whatever reason it didn't take off. Just to circle back real quick before we bow out, and I heard something break upstairs about 10 minutes ago. I hope it was valuable. That was my comedy career in Los Angeles. Was that it wasn't so much I did want to come back because I wanted to work at 98, and an afternoon drive was great, but I was out there doing what you did with those shows every day, open mics every day, auditions, and it just didn't work. People weren't buying what I was selling. And it wasn't because they're idiots and don't get my genius. And it wasn't because, I'm just a clueless, cross-eyed gump from the swamps of Waldorf. It just, they were all full up on the shelves of what I was selling. Really. It was, Rory was so incredibly unique, and Aparna was so incredibly unique, and Jermaine Fowler, and you've seen some people like your Nick Mullen. Nick Mullen from formerly Come Town and now the Adam Friedland Show. He was out there spinning his wheels, as genius as he is now. And LA was like, nah, not interested. Then fast forward, 8-9 years later, and he's got a podcast that's bringing in $130,000 a month on Patreon, and is building television studios, and is now having this new venture. And Stavros, same thing, Stavy Baby from Baltimore, he's selling out theaters. Certain comedy scenes are like, nah, not buying what you're selling. I'm like, all right. and they either find another route, which those guys did and are now millionaires, or you find another route like I did, which is like, hey, I got this radio opportunity, I want to do it, and I'm in love with it now, and I don't miss stand-up. You do look back and go, I wonder if I'd have stuck around for a year or two. I wonder if I'd have, just powered through, if my time would have come. Man, I have some friends out there that it never did. And now they're in their 40s and nothing panned out, and they've walked the path too far to turn around, but the path ahead is as rocky as the one behind it. And you go, God damn, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? You're going to work HVAC? You're going to become an HVAC apprentice at 50? Or are you going to be that, we used to call them ghosts, those guys that would haunt the road that have been doing the same act since 85, that they never rose above a sea level room in Lancaster, PA, but it's too late to turn around because it's all they know and they just haunt the road. That was a scary existence for me. I didn't have the stones to wait to see what had happened. I couldn't gamble like that. I just didn't have it. So it's frustrating. Like you said, I thought the work that I was doing was good and the comedy was good and my auditions I practiced for and tried, much in the same way. You work for those weeks and weeks and weeks on that product. And then when you put it out there, like, yes, what a great product. Why is no one consuming it? Damn it. And the market's just like, not what we're interested right now. Thanks anyways. Thanks for coming. And you have to just take that and swallow it and move on, or let it eat you up and wander into the woods with a scythe, hoping to come upon some unsuspecting hiker. Whereas they reach down to pluck that fresh strawberry that they'd noticed growing wild, saying, ooh, I wonder if this is edible or not. Let me check my book. And as they flip to page 55, this is a northern Maryland Mongolian strawberry, smaller than a regular one, but still is edible. They feel the cold steel of Dennis's blade unsuspectedly massaging their windpipe as they look down at the ground, and not only is the strawberry red, so is the grass, the foliage, the fields, and the shoes beneath. As Dennis leans in and says, you should have listened to my podcast, fucker.
I think that's the perfect way to wrap this up, with knowing what you want. Like, that is the scary road ahead of us. I look at, former, the song Raised on the Radio from the Ravens, the band The Ravens, Rob Fahey. I think he's one of those, like, I don't want to insult Rob. I've met him a bunch of times, swell guy, and he's happy what he's doing. But I look at him and I see, my apologies for the words, but washed up singer who's just playing open mics at bars in Dundalk. And I'm like, that's not what I want. I want to still be relevant. I still want to be able to fight, but I see that as my future, the music version of my future, where he's just like playing REM cover tunes at open mics. And I'm like, that is sad. And if he's happy with that, that's great. I don't want that. I want to keep pushing and working and going for good things. And I want to see all my other talented friends having the same level of success. So I think sometimes I vicariously feel bad when I see somebody not trudging through the way that I still am, but because you've made your decision and what you're doing is making you happy. And that's all that matters. Is if you're happy, then it doesn't, and nothing else matters. You do what you do that makes you happy.
Never been happier.
And that's great. And I love to hear that. So I'm so glad we got to have this talk. I'm glad we got to catch up.
I appreciate you asking me, man.
Of course. 1,000% all the time. If I had things that I could put you on, I would put you on 100% of them, 100% of the time, man.
I might be begging you for you to do that one day when I accidentally do something on the air where I spread my butt cheeks towards the live wire camera and say, who wants to ring the devil's doorbell? And I'm like, well, guess Dennis is my supervisor now.
All right. And everyone listen, please check out Justin. You can find him on Instagram as Justin98Rock. And of course, DLP Agenda.
98online.com. 98online.com too. Download the 98 Rock mobile app. Listen to us around the world.
You can listen. I listen every morning. I wake up. It's the first thing I put on my phone. And I sit there and I listen in the mornings before I get my day started.
All right, Dennis, I appreciate it, bud. I'm going to go blow my hand off with an M80.
All right. Have a good one. I'll listen to you live tomorrow morning from the hospital bed. Good night.
Later, buddy.